Now we're going to look at the psychodynamic approach. So if we have a look at the advanced information, we need to be looking at the role of the unconscious, the structure of personality, and we need to include the id, ego, and superego there. Defense mechanisms, including repression, denial, and displacement, and psychosexual stages. So there's quite a lot of content for the psychodynamic approach, but as long as you're aware of the key terms and the roles of the different parts, so the role of the unconscious, it says the structure of personality, so that's a key term there, structure, look for that in the question. And then make sure you're aware of the different defense mechanisms and the role of the defense mechanisms also. And we'll have a look at the different psychosexual stages. We have a little diagram here. So again, if you're quite a visual person when you are revising, you may want to draw this diagram. You could fill in some additional information on the diagram, so you could define the key terms on the diagram also. It might help you if you're just a visual learner when it comes to revising. So we'll start with the role of the unconscious. The unconscious. This includes our biological drives and instincts and has a significant influence on our behaviour and personality. The unconscious also contains threatening and disturbing memories that have been repressed. These can be accessed during dreams or through slips of the tongue. So the unconscious, that's our biological drives. It's the bit that's underneath, that we're not aware of day to day. It's where all of things that have been repressed get pushed underneath the surface. The preconscious, this contains thoughts and memories which we are not currently in conscious awareness, but we can access if desired. So we can access our preconscious if we need to. So think about when you're thinking about a particular time or place, you can access your memories. Your memories are stored in your preconscious. The conscious, the part of mind which we know and are aware of. So we're looking at the role of the unconscious according to the key terms in the advanced information. So what does the unconscious do? So it's this idea that it contains threatening and disturbing memories. It's where things that have been repressed go. It also contains our biological drives. For example, if we look at the diagram, you can see that in the unconscious you've got the id, which is those biological drives that we have. And you also have a large part of the superego within that unconscious as well. So the id links to the unconscious because it lies purely in the unconscious, but it also links to the structure of personality. So Freud suggests that our personality is split into three parts: the id or the ID, the ego, and the superego. The id is the primitive part of our personality. It operates on the pleasure principle. It is based on unconscious drives and instincts. Only the id is present at birth. It is selfish and demands instant gratification. The ego works on the reality principle, and it is the mediator between the other two parts of the personality. The ego develops around the age of 2. Its role is to reduce the conflict between the demands of the id and the superego. It manages this by using defense mechanisms. So you can bring in those defense mechanisms there if you wish to elaborate. The superego is formed at the end of the phallic stage, so that's a psychosexual stage, around the age of 5. It is our internalized sense of right and wrong. Based on the morality principle, it represents the moral standards of the child's same gender parent and punishes the ego for wrongdoing through guilt. So you feel guilty, which is a punishment for the ego. Psychosexual stages. Freud claimed that child development occurred in 5 stages. Each stage, apart from latency, is marked by a different conflict that the child must resolve in order to progress successfully onto the next stage, such as the Oedipus conflict. The Oedipus conflict links to the Little Hands research. Any psychosexual conflict that is unresolved leads to fixation, where the child becomes stuck and carries certain behaviours and conflicts associated with that stage through to adult life. So you have quite a lot in the psychosexual stages, but you don't necessarily need all of that information. It kind of depends on the question. So here is an image of that. So you've got oral, anal, phallic, latency and genital. You've got the different ages. You've got the focus of each of the stages. The developments and the examples of fixation. I think we learn this through an acronym, which was Old Age Pensioners Like Gin, to remember the different stages. So you can use an acronym to help you remember these stages. Make sure you make a note of the fixations and the different developments also. So you might just want to draw that table down. If you're really struggling to remember all of the stages, try and remember the acronym and then maybe pick a couple of stages to learn in a little bit more detail. I can see here that I haven't got down the information for the defense mechanisms and the definitions of those words, so repression, denial and displacement. You can access this information from the digital textbook or from your notes, and in the worksheet there is a space for you to outline these different defense mechanisms. So for repression, we have the idea that traumatic experiences are pushed into the unconscious, and this is repression. These can then be shown in other behaviours. So for example, if we look at Little Hands' research, Freud's research with Little Hands, Little Hands repressed his fear of his father, and this came out as a different behaviour, as a phobia of horses, because he associated the horses with his father's image. Then you have displacement, where you put your feelings onto another object or another person. So for example, if you have had a bad experience at home, say like in the morning, you didn't do something, your mum shouted at you, and then you left home and you went to school and you got really mad at your teachers when they told you to do something. That teacher hadn't done anything wrong, it was just that you were displacing your anger from the situation that occurred in the morning onto another individual. Or another example, say a teacher told you off in lesson and then you left the lesson and you kicked your locker. You're displacing your anger from the teacher and that experience onto that locker that inanimate object. And then you have denial, where you ignore the problems that have occurred and you don't accept them. So, for example, you may have lost your job, but the following day you would get up, you would put your suit on, you would make your packed lunch, and you would head off to your workplace, and you would walk into your workplace and as if there was nothing wrong. You're in denial and you're not accepting the situation. So have a look through your notes and write down some definitions for these 3 key terms: repression, denial, and displacement. Then we have evaluation. So I've got here Little Hands supporting research. So you will have in your notes again, you will have the outline of Little Hands' research. Little Hands is this study. He had a phobia of horses. His father wrote letters to Freud, and Freud interpreted these letters as to mean that Little Hands actually was going through the Oedipus complex. Within the Oedipus complex, the key thing is for a child to relate to their same-sex parent. And when they go through that process, especially with Little Hands, he was fearful of his father. He saw his father as a threat. And only when he learnt to identify with his father did he come out of this stage. But while he was in this stage and he was afraid of his father because he feared that his father would castrate him and he saw his father as a rival, when he was going through this stage he demonstrated a fear of horses, and Freud said that was because the horse reminded Hans of his father because of the blinkers, which looked like his father's glasses. So yeah, make sure you write that down from your notes, from your key study, put it in the worksheet. Use Little Hands only to support the psychodynamic approach as part of evaluation. Don't use it in your main outline. In your main outline, you need to be talking about psychosexual stages, structure of personality, the role of the unconscious, and defense mechanisms. So, we'll look at some evaluation points here. The approach introduced the idea of psychotherapy. Psychoanalysis was the first attempt to treat mental disorders psychologically rather than physically. This therapy used a range of techniques such as dream analysis. Psychoanalysis claims to help clients by bringing their repressed emotions into their conscious mind so they can be dealt with. Psychoanalysis led to other talking therapies such as counselling, which shows the value of the psychodynamic approach in creating a new approach to treatment. So it was good because it was revolutionary and it changed people's opinion of psychology and it changed people's opinion on therapy and how you should treat others. However, psychoanalysis may be inappropriate or even harmful for people experiencing more serious mental disorders such as schizophrenia. Many of the symptoms of schizophrenia, such as paranoia and delusional thinking, mean that those with the disorder have lost their grip on reality and they cannot articulate their thoughts in the way required by psychoanalysis. If anything, a biological treatment may be more suitable for schizophrenia. So, psychoanalysis might not apply to all mental disorders, so it might only help a few, and we need to also consider other treatments for more serious mental disorders. Strength: the approach is able to explain human behaviour. So Freud's theory has been used to explain a wide range of phenomena, including personality development, the origins of psychological disorders, moral development, and gender identity. The approach is important because it focuses on the connection between our experiences in childhood, such as our relationship with our parents, and our later development. So it suggests that it has had a positive impact on psychology. And then we have a limitation. Much of the approach is untestable. Popper argued that the psychodynamic approach does not meet the scientific criterion of falsification, as it cannot be empirically tested and therefore disproved. So we can't falsify the psychodynamic approach because it does not use psychological studies. It does not use scientific research. Because it doesn't use scientific research and because the theories are not objective and they're difficult to test, then we cannot falsify them. Freud's ideas were based on case studies such as Little Hands, which makes it difficult to make universal claims about human behaviour. It's really hard to generalise case studies to the wider population. There's also other faults with his research, such as Little Hans, because Hans's father was friends with Freud. Everything was done through letters. Freud only met Little Hans a handful of times. There may be some researcher bias there. So there are many issues with the research that Freud used to support his theories. It suggests that Freud's theory was pseudoscientific, so not a real science, rather than established fact. Although it's still referenced to today, it's not as scientific as, say, the behaviourist approach. Okay, so make sure you're aware of all of the key terms that we have here and all of the key terms that are on your worksheet. So the role of the unconscious, the structure of personality, you know what the id, ego and superego do, you know what defense mechanisms are, and you can explain repression, denial and displacement, and you can go through those psychosexual stages. Within the exam questions, there's a few different ones. You've got some questions that ask about the role of the unconscious. And this question came up in the exam a couple of years ago and people really struggled with it, even though it's a short mark question. It's this idea, what is the role of it? What does it do? So make sure you're aware of the wording of the questions. There's also a longer question that asks you to compare the psychodynamic approach and the humanistic approach in terms of evaluation and discussion. So even though it doesn't necessarily say comparison of approaches on the advanced information, it still helps when you're evaluating to be able to discuss the similarities and differences between the approaches, because it just expands your evaluation and makes your evaluation a little better and a little more higher level. So again, make sure you're aware of all of these key terms. There's space on your worksheet to define these key terms and explain them, and have a go at those exam questions.